And if I told you that in 1845 in Savannah, Georgia, someone could predict the ruin of entire families just by observing calligraphy? That handwritten letters announced, days in advance, when devastating secrets would be exposed, and that the only person capable of deciphering these messages was a calligraphy teacher who would become the next victim. Stay until the end, because this true story will show you how the most refined art can become the most lethal weapon. Are you curious to know this story? Comment fear. If you want to discover how a simple calligraphy teacher became the key to unraveling the darkest secrets of Savannah. The year 1845 finds Savannah, Georgia, wrapped in a perpetual melancholy that seems to emanate from the very stones of its streets. The ancient mansions of red brick and limestone rise majestically along the 24 tree-lined squares of the city, each one a monument to wealth, built upon foundations that the elite prefer to keep buried. Spanish moss hangs from the centennial oaks like eternal mourning veils, creating dancing shadows that seem to guard secrets in every movement of the humid wind that blows from the Savannah River. The Georgian and federal architecture of the mansions displays an austere beauty, but there is something suffocating in the perfection of these facades. The blown glass windows reflect not only the golden light of the southern sun, but also the watchful gazes of a society that lives under a rigid code of appearances. Each elite family, the Mercers with their cotton plantations, the Habershams with their merchant ships, the Telfairs with their banks, the Gordons with their factories, built their fortunes on foundations that must never be excavated. The humid heat of September hangs over the city like an unfulfilled promise. The air carries the sweet and nauseating aroma of magnolias mixed with the salty smell of the port, creating an atmosphere that is simultaneously seductive and oppressive. On the cobblestone streets, the carriages of important families pass in silent procession, their occupants protected by damask curtains that isolate them from the outside world, and the outside world from them. Savannah society in 1845 is a complex machine of rituals and hierarchies. Mornings begin with the tolling of Christchurch bells, calling the faithful to prayers that are more public demonstrations of virtue than genuine expressions of faith. Afternoons are dedicated to elaborate teas in mansion parlors, where elite ladies discuss charity and morality, while their husbands close deals that frequently violate both. Evenings belong to balls and formal dinners, where every gesture is carefully choreographed to maintain appearances. Men wear English wool coats even in the suffocating heat, while women adorn themselves with silks and jewels that cost fortunes built on slave labor that they prefer not to mention in their refined conversations. Behind the impeccable facades, however, reside truths that must never see the light of day. Each family guards its skeletons, covered up murders, legitimized thefts, betrayals that destroyed entire lives. Savannah's elite learned that power comes not only from wealth, but from the ability to keep secrets and to destroy those who threaten to reveal them. Miss Aurelia Vance, at 34 years old, is an anomaly carefully tolerated in Savannah society. Single by choice and economically independent by necessity, she occupies a peculiar position in the city's social fabric, respected enough to teach the daughters of the elite, but sufficiently marginalized to observe without being truly seen. Her small house on Jones Street, a modest two-story construction with a wrought-iron balcony, serves as a calligraphy school for the young ladies of the city. The house, inherited from her aunt, is impeccably organized. On the first floor, the main classroom houses polished mahogany tables, where her students practice the art of perfect writing. The walls are decorated with examples of calligraphy from different eras and styles, a visual library that Aurelia built over the years. Aurelia possesses a rare gift that makes her indispensable to the elite. Her hands can reproduce any writing style with surgical precision. She knows the handwriting of every important family, each characteristic flourish, each peculiarity of the pen. More than that, she can read between the lines, literally. The pressure of the ink, the angle of the letters, the speed of writing reveal to her emotional states, lies, poorly kept secrets. Her routine is methodical, like a religious ritual. Classes in the morning from 8 to 11, when she teaches the young elite to form letters with the elegance demanded by society. Afternoons are dedicated to corrections and developing new exercises. But it is the long nights that reveal Aurelia's true passion, hours dedicated to practicing her art, experimenting with different styles, perfecting techniques that few in the world master. Aurelia lives on the periphery of power, observing everything, mentally recording every detail, every inconsistency in the behavior of her students and their families. She notices when a young woman arrives at class with poorly disguised tear marks, when a mother avoids her gaze during meetings, when a family suddenly cancels classes without explanation. These details accumulate in her mind like pieces of a gigantic puzzle that she doesn't yet fully understand. In the shadows of Savannah, someone watches with the patience of a predator. This figure remains invisible, but its presence is felt through an apparently harmless instrument, the art of calligraphy. Not yet revealed, but this antagonist understands that in a society based on appearances, the written word possesses devastating power, especially when that word anticipates truths that should remain buried forever. This silent observer studied not only the secrets of Savannah's families, but also the methods of who could reveal them. He knows intimately Aurelia's work, her styles, her techniques, her peculiarities. More disturbing still, he understands that Aurelia's own art can be transformed into a weapon against her. Savannah's fragility lies exactly in this dependence on appearances. A single revelation can destroy generations of carefully constructed prestige. And someone is about to use this fragility as a weapon of mass destruction, transforming the beauty of calligraphy into an instrument of psychological terror. It was an October morning in 1845 when the first envelope appeared like a dark stain on the morning perfection of Savannah. Mrs. Eleanor Habersham, a 58-year-old matriarch of one of the city's oldest families, found it slipped under the main door of her mansion on Madison Square. The envelope contrasted violently with the white marble of the steps, superior quality paper, European linen with an almost silky texture, but sealed with black wax that seemed to absorb the golden morning light. Mrs. Habersham, a woman accustomed to controlling every aspect of her life and her family's life, felt an inexplicable chill when touching the paper. The black seal bore only an ornate initial, "Thanks, Steve," elaborated with flourishes that she recognized but couldn't completely identify. Her hands, normally firm when handling family correspondence, trembled slightly when opening the envelope. The internal paper was of the same luxurious quality, but what most disturbed her was not the content of the letter, but the calligraphy itself. It was perfect. Each letter formed with a precision that she immediately recognized, the style taught by Miss Aurelia Vance to society's young women. But there was something different, something more elaborate and sinister, as if perfection itself had been perfected by hands that knew secrets that not even Aurelia herself suspected. The message was brief, formal, and absolutely terrifying. "Phew, dear Mrs. Habersham, on October 15th of the current year at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the secret of the basement of the Bull Street property will be revealed to the competent authorities. The body of Samuel, the slave who supposedly fled in 1830, will be found exactly where you buried him after the accident that cost his life. Prepare for the consequences of your actions. Truth, like ink, always finds a way to emerge. Sincerely, an observer of truth. E. Mrs. Habersham read the letter 3 times before her brain completely processed the content. Her legs failed, and she leaned against the marble wall of the entrance hall, feeling the world spin around her. Samuel. No one had mentioned that name in 15 years. No one knew. No one could know. 3 days later, Mrs. Habersham appeared at Aurelia's calligraphy school in a state of carefully controlled panic. She had spent the last 72 hours trying to discover who could have written that letter, and all clues pointed to the only person in Savannah capable of producing such perfect calligraphy. "So, Miss Vance?" "Yeah," she said, her normally authoritative voice now laden with poorly disguised tension. "I need you to examine something for me. Someone is imitating your school's teaching style." "Tasa?" Her hands trembled slightly when she handed over the letter for analysis, trying to maintain the composure she had cultivated during decades of social life. Aurelia immediately perceived that something was deeply wrong. Mrs. Habersham was known for her coldness and absolute control. Seeing her in such a state of agitation was like witnessing a marble statue suddenly come to life. Aurelia examined the paper with the meticulousness of a forensic investigator. Her trained eyes traveled over every line, every curve, every dot of ink. Immediately, she perceived the anomaly that would make her blood freeze. The calligraphy was too perfect. Each curve, each angle, Each spacing followed the rules she taught, but with a mechanical precision that none of her students had ever achieved. It was as if someone had studied not only her method, but also her own hands, her own movements, her own artistic soul. More disturbing still, Aurelia recognized elements of her own personal calligraphy, small flourishes that she used only in her private writings, techniques that she had never taught in class, secrets of her art that she kept only to herself. Whoever had written that letter not only knew her public methods, but had somehow penetrated her most intimate secrets. "Where Mrs. Habersham," said Aurelia, her voice carefully controlled, "read this calligraphy. It imitates my style, but there are elements here that I never taught. Elements that She stopped, realizing she was about to reveal more than she should. "Iwi elements that—" "What, Miss Vance?" Mrs. Habersham's voice carried desperate urgency. "Iwi elements that suggest whoever wrote this had access to my personal writings. This is not just an imitation, it's a violation." "Tas." On October 15th, exactly at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as predicted in the letter with terrifying precision, municipal workers discovered in the basement of the Habersham property on Bull Street the mortal remains of a black man of approximately 30 years. The bones were wrapped in rags that had once been slave clothes, and beside the body, like a macabre signature, there was a small metal plaque with the name Uru Samuelj engraved in elegant letters. The discovery was not accidental. An anonymous tip had reached the sheriff exactly at 2:30 in the afternoon, providing precise instructions about where to dig. The voice of the informant, according to witnesses, was educated and calm, like someone reporting the weather. The news spread through the city like fire in dry cotton. Mrs. Habersham was arrested that same afternoon, and her family, one of the most respected in Savannah, saw their reputation crumble in a matter of hours. Local newspapers published special editions, and the streets filled with curious and scandalized onlookers. But what most disturbed the community was not just the crime itself, but the prophetic precision of the revelation. Someone not only knew about the murder, but had orchestrated its discovery with a precision that defied any rational explanation. In the following days, other envelopes began to appear like crows landing on different mansions in the city. Always the same fine European linen paper, always the black seal with the initial Nafwa Korn, always the impossible calligraphy that imitated Aurelia's style but carried elements she had never taught. The Mercer family received their letter the following Monday. The content revealed details about an PQSE accidental fire on one of their plantations 15 years before, a fire that had killed an entire family of slaves who threatened to reveal abuses. The letter predicted that evidence of the crime would be found on Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, buried under what was now a rose garden. The Telfairs received their sentence on Tuesday. Their letter detailed a money laundering scheme through their banks, involving the financing of illegal slave trafficking operations. The prediction, incriminating documents would be discovered during a surprise audit on Thursday. The Gordons were next. Their letter revealed that they had murdered a business partner and forged documents to steal his inheritance. The prediction, the body would be found on Friday in a location they thought was secret. Aurelia perceived that these were not random threats. There was a meticulous pattern. All targeted families possessed fortunes built on dark secrets from the past. All had used their position of power to cover up heinous crimes, and all had daughters who studied calligraphy at her school. Most terrifying, the predictions were fulfilled with surgical precision. They were not threats. They were announcements of a justice that was already in motion, executed by someone who knew not only the family's secrets, but also the exact methods to reveal them at the most devastating moment possible. As each prediction was confirmed, the city of Savannah plunged into growing panic. Elite families began locking themselves in their mansions, firing suspicious employees, burning compromising documents, but none of this mattered. The Nippity Nanas observer of truth fronts seemed to always be one step ahead, always knowing exactly where to look, always capable of anticipating their attempts to cover up evidence. And at the center of it all was Aurelia, whose art had become the instrument of a meticulously planned revenge. Each new letter she analyzed revealed more about the extent of the antagonist's knowledge. He not only knew the family's crimes, he knew Aurelia. He knew her methods, her secrets, her vulnerabilities. The question that haunted her sleepless nights was simple and terrifying. If he knew everyone else's secrets, what secrets did he know about her? Aurelia spent the next week in a state of constant vigilance, transforming her house into a forensic investigation laboratory. She spread all received letters over her work table, creating a visual map of the attacks. Each envelope, each sheet of paper, each trace of ink was catalogued and analyzed with the precision of a scientist. The pattern that emerged was even more disturbing than she had initially imagined. The Nanderman's observer of Truthfixus was not simply revealing random crimes. He was executing a systematic campaign of destruction that followed a specific logic. The families were being attacked in chronological order of the crimes they had committed, starting with the oldest and advancing toward the most recent. More sinister still, each revelation was timed to cause maximum possible damage. Mrs. Havisham was exposed on the eve of an important charity event that her family had organized for decades. The Mercers were destroyed on the day they announced a major expansion of their business. The Telfairs saw their reputation crumble exactly when they were negotiating a crucial loan for the city. Aurelia began keeping a detailed record of everything she observed, writing in a code of her own creation, a variation of calligraphy that she had developed in adolescence and had never taught anyone. Her notes revealed an even more disturbing pattern. Didrudakungs October 15th. Havisham exposed. Crime. Murder of Samuel, 1830. Discovery method. Anonymous tip with exact location. Timing. Eve of annual charity ball. October 18th. Mercers destroyed. Crime, intentional fire, 1832. Evidence, bones found under rose garden. Timing, day of expansion announcement. October 21st. Telfairs ruined. Crime, money laundering, illegal trafficking. Evidence, documents discovered in audit. Timing, municipal loan negotiation. October 24th. Gordons exposed. Crime, partner murder, inheritance theft, 1835. Evidence, body in secret location. Timing, government contract signing. Each entry revealed not only the extent of the antagonist's knowledge, but also his ability to manipulate events and people to achieve his objectives. He was not just revealing crimes. He was orchestrating the total destruction of each family with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. It was during one of her nightly analyses that Aurelia made a discovery that made her blood freeze. Examining the letters under a magnifying glass, she noticed something that had previously gone unnoticed, almost invisible watermarks in the paper. They were not commercial marks from the manufacturer, but deliberately inserted symbols, small drawings that, when seen together, formed a pattern. The symbols were variations of her own artistic signature, small flourishes that she used to mark her most personal works. But there was something wrong with them. They were like distorted reflections of her art, corrupted versions that maintained the essence, but carried a malevolence that made her feel nauseous. More disturbing still, the watermarks were organized in a sequence that corresponded exactly to the order in which she had taught these techniques to her students over the years. Someone had been meticulously documenting not only her public methods, but also her most intimate moments of artistic creation. Aurelia's investigation led her to a terrifying conclusion. The antagonist had access not only to information about elite families, but also to her own personal files. Someone had been in her house, in her studio, examining her private works, studying her secret techniques. She began mentally reviewing everyone who had had access to her house in recent years. Students, parents of students, suppliers, domestic employees. The list was long, but one name began to stand out. Margaret Whitmore, one of her former students who had demonstrated exceptional talent for calligraphy and an almost obsessive interest in Aurelia's methods. Margaret had been her most dedicated student 3 years before, attending not only regular classes, but also requesting private sessions where Aurelia, impressed with her talent, had shared some of her most advanced techniques. The young woman had suddenly disappeared from Savannah after a family scandal that was never completely clarified. Aurelia began discreetly investigating Margaret Whitmore's whereabouts. What she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about her former student. Margaret had not simply left Savannah. She had been expelled from her family after discovering and threatening to reveal family secrets that could destroy not only the Whitmores but several other elite families. The Whitmores had used their influence to silence Margaret, sending her to treatment at a distant institution. But Margaret had escaped, and since then, no one knew her whereabouts. Until now. The chronology was perfect. Margaret had disappeared exactly 3 years before, enough time to plan an elaborate revenge. She knew the family's secrets because she had grown up among them. She knew Aurelia's techniques because she had been her most dedicated student. And she had motives for revenge because she had been betrayed by both. Now tell me, do you believe Margaret is really the culprit, or is there something more sinister behind these letters? Comment your theory. Aurelia's investigation led her to an even more disturbing discovery. Following clues left in the letters' watermarks, she located what appeared to be the Observer of Truth's center of operations, an abandoned house on the outskirts of Savannah, hidden among the swamps and accessible only by an almost invisible trail. The house had belonged to the Whitmores decades before, but was abandoned after a family tragedy that few remembered. Aurelia discovered that Margaret had been using the property as a base for her operations, transforming it into a meticulous archive of crimes and secrets. The interior of the house was a terrifying vision of obsession and planning. The walls were covered with maps of Savannah, photographs of elite families, copies of incriminating documents, and, most disturbing of all, hundreds of examples of Aurelia's calligraphy, some copied from legitimate works, others clearly stolen from her house. At the center of everything was a work table, where Margaret had tirelessly practiced imitating Aurelia's calligraphy, perfecting each stroke until achieving a precision that rivaled the original. Stacks of European linen paper, special ink bottles, pens of different types, all the materials necessary to produce the letters that were terrorizing Savannah. But most disturbing of all was a detailed diary, where Margaret had documented not only her revenge plans, but also her observations about Aurelia. Pages and pages of psychological analyses, behavioral studies, predictions about how Aurelia would react to each revelation. Margaret was not just using Aurelia as a tool, she was studying her like a specimen. On Margaret's work table, Aurelia found the evidence that confirmed her worst suspicions, a detailed manuscript titled The Art of Revenge, How to Destroy a Society Through Its Own Words. The document was a disturbing manifesto that revealed not only the extent of Savannah family's crimes, but also the twisted philosophy behind the attacks. Margaret had meticulously documented each crime, each cover-up, each injustice committed by the city's elite. But more than that, she had developed a theory about how to use society's own culture and values against itself. Calligraphy, symbol of refinement and education, had become her weapon of choice precisely because it represented everything the elite valued. Savannah, the irony is perfect, wrote Margaret in a particularly shocking passage. They value the appearance of civilization so much that they become vulnerable to any threat to that appearance. Perfect calligraphy is not just a skill, it's a status symbol, a mark of superiority. Using this same art to reveal their inner rot is the most poetic revenge possible. The manifesto revealed that Margaret was not just avenging her own expulsion from Savannah. She had become a self-proclaimed vigilante, determined to expose the hypocrisy of an entire society. Each destroyed family was just a step toward a greater objective, the complete collapse of the social structure that had allowed such crimes. But the most terrifying discovery was in the final pages of the manifesto, the plan for the final attack. Margaret had saved the best for last, or from her distorted point of view, the worst. Her next victim would be Aurelia herself. Miss Aurelia Vance Keys, wrote Margaret, with a coldness that made the words seem poisonous. Wrights believes she is an innocent observer in this drama. She does not understand that her own art has become complicit in the crimes it helped cover up. Each perfect letter she taught to the elite's daughters was a tool used to keep secrets, to perpetuate lies, to preserve a corrupt social order. Margaret's plan for Aurelia was particularly cruel. She had discovered a secret from Aurelia's past, a secret that Aurelia herself had buried so deeply that she had almost managed to forget. 15 years before, when Aurelia was young and desperate for money, she had forged documents for a wealthy family, allowing them to steal an inheritance that legitimately belonged to a family of freed slaves. Margaret had found evidence of this forgery and planned to reveal it in a way that would destroy not only Aurelia's reputation, but also her sanity. The final letter would be written in Aurelia's own calligraphy, not an imitation, but using her own hands, forcing her to confess her crimes in her own perfect handwriting. Aurelia was still absorbing the horror of what she had discovered when she heard footsteps on the abandoned house's porch. Margaret had returned, and the final confrontation was about to begin. Margaret Whitmore, at 25 years old, was a distorted version of the brilliant young woman Aurelia had known. Her eyes, once full of admiration and thirst for knowledge, now shone with a fanatic intensity that made Aurelia instinctively recoil. She was dressed simply but elegantly, and in her hands she carried a leather briefcase that Aurelia recognized. It was identical to her own calligraphy materials briefcase. "Chai, Miss Vance," said Margaret, her voice maintaining the formal education that Aurelia had helped cultivate. What an unexpected pleasure to find you here. Although, thinking about it, perhaps it's not so unexpected after all. You were always too observant for your own good." "Shrilly, Margaret." Aurelia tried to keep her voice calm. "What you've done, the crimes you've revealed. I understand your anger, but this is not justice, this is revenge." "Oh, revenge?" Margaret laughed, a sound that carried no humor. "No, Miss Vance, this is education. I am teaching this city a lesson it should have learned long ago, that truth, like ink, always finds a way to emerge." Margaret opened her briefcase, revealing not only calligraphy materials, but also a small and elegant pistol. "So, now, Miss Vance, you are going to help me write the final letter, your confession, in your own perfect handwriting. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?" Margaret continued, watching Aurelia's face pale. "The Pemberton documents. 1830. You were only 19 years old, desperate for money after your parents' death. The Pemberton family offered a generous sum for you to correct some inheritance documents." Aurelia felt the world spin around her. The secret she had buried so deeply was being exhumed with the same surgical precision that Margaret had used with all the other families. "You forged the Pemberton patriarch's signature," Margaret continued implacably. "Re-altered dates, modified values. The result? The family of freed slaves who should have inherited the plantation lost everything. They died in poverty, while the Pembertons became even richer with stolen property." "I was young," Aurelia whispered. "I didn't understand the consequences." But you did understand," Margaret replied. "You understood perfectly. And for 15 years you lived with this secret, teaching the elite's daughters to write with the same perfection you used to steal from an entire family." Margaret forced Aurelia to sit at the work table, placing paper and pen before her. "How? Now you are going to write your confession, every word, every letter in your perfect calligraphy. And when you finish, this letter will be delivered to all important families in Savannah, to the newspapers, to the authorities. Your reputation will be destroyed in the same way you helped destroy other lives." But Margaret had made a fatal error in her obsession with perfection. She had underestimated Aurelia herself, who had spent weeks studying Margaret's methods, learning her patterns, understanding her psychology. While Margaret spoke, Aurelia discreetly prepared her own trap. She had brought with her a letter she had written specifically for this moment, a letter that would reveal the truth about Margaret and her crimes, written in the perfect calligraphy that Margaret so admired. "Margaret," said Aurelia, her voice gaining strength. "You made a mistake. You assumed I would be a passive victim like all the others, but you forgot something important. I am the teacher, and you, however talented you may be, are still my student." So what Margaret had not perceived in her obsession with revenge was that Aurelia had spent the last weeks not only investigating, but also preparing her own response. The letter that Aurelia had brought with her was not just a confession. It was a complete exposure of Margaret's crimes, documented with the same meticulous precision that Margaret herself had used against the elite families. "You invaded private properties," said Aurelia, keeping her voice firm while Margaret pointed the pistol at her with trembling hands. You stole documents, blackmailed witnesses, and in at least 2 cases, you planted evidence to ensure your predictions would come true." Margaret's face contorted with rage, the mask of educated composure finally slipping away to reveal the madness beneath. That doesn't matter. The crimes I revealed are real. These families are monsters who destroyed innocent lives." "Yes, they are real," Aurelia agreed, her voice gaining strength as she continued writing. "But your methods make them inadmissible in any court. You didn't bring justice, Margaret, you brought chaos. And in the process, you became exactly what you claimed to fight, a criminal who uses power to destroy lives. Fancy, Margaret stepped closer, pressing the pistol against Aurelia's temple. The cold metal made Aurelia's hand pause for just a moment before she continued writing with deliberate calm. Right, stop writing that nonsense and write your confession, or I'll kill you right here. Will you? Aurelia asked, not looking up from her work. Tell us just like you killed Jonathan Mercer when he discovered you were blackmailing his family, just like you murdered Sarah Telfair when she realized the documents in her bank were forgeries. Margaret's breathing became erratic. They were going to ruin everything. Jonathan was going to expose me before I could finish revealing his family's crimes. Sarah was going to prove the documents were fake and destroy all the evidence I had worked so hard to gather. So you poisoned Jonathan with arsenic, Aurelia continued, her pen moving steadily across the paper. Gee, you made it look like suicide from guilt over his family's exposed crimes. But you made a mistake, Margaret. You used the same arsenic that was missing from the Mercer Plantation's rat poison stores. Margaret's eyes widened. She hadn't realized that detail had been discovered. You and Sarah, Aurelia pressed on. You pushed her down the marble stairs of her own mansion. But you didn't know that her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, saw you leaving through the garden gate just minutes after the accident. You're lying, Margaret screamed, but her voice cracked with uncertainty. Am I? Aurelia finally looked up, meeting Margaret's wild gaze with steady eyes. Mrs. Patterson described a young woman in a dark blue dress with distinctive silver buttons. The same dress you're wearing now, Margaret. The same dress you wore to my classes 3 years ago. Margaret looked down at her dress as if seeing it for the first time. It was indeed the same one. She had kept it as a reminder of her time as Aurelia's student, back when she still believed in the possibility of justice through proper channels. You've been planning this for 3 years, Aurelia continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining a lesson. So ever since your family cast you out for threatening to expose their secrets. But your plan was flawed from the beginning, Margaret, because it was built on hatred rather than justice. Don't lecture me about justice. Margaret's voice rose to a near shriek. Kels, you know nothing about justice. You who helped the Pembertons steal from freed slaves. You who taught the daughters of murderers to write pretty letters while their parents buried bodies. You're right, Aurelia said quietly, setting down her pen. Darcy, I am guilty. I did help the Pembertons steal that inheritance. I was young and desperate, but that's no excuse. I've lived with that guilt every day for 15 years. Margaret blinked, surprised by the admission. But here's the difference between us, Margaret. Aurelia continued, standing slowly from her chair. I learned from my mistake. I spent years trying to make amends, helping families who had been wronged, using my skills to fight for justice rather than revenge. You let your pain turn you into something monstrous. I am not a monster, Margaret shouted, but tears were streaming down her face now. So I'm the only one who cared enough to make them pay for their crimes. By becoming a killer yourself? Aurelia asked gently. Just by murdering innocent people who got in your way. Margaret, look at what you've become. Look at what your quest for revenge has turned you into. Margaret's hand holding the pistol began to shake violently. For a moment, the facade of the cold, calculating killer cracked, and Aurelia could see the broken young woman underneath, the brilliant student who had once sat in her classroom, eager to learn, full of hope and potential. I didn't want to kill them, Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible. But they were going to stop me. They were going to let the real criminals escape justice. And what about the justice for Jonathan and Sarah? Aurelia asked. So what about their families? Their children who will grow up without parents because you decided their lives were worth less than your revenge. Margaret's face crumpled. I never thought. I was so focused on the greater good. There is no greater good that comes from murder, Margaret, Aurelia said firmly. Justice built on innocent blood is not justice at all. It's just another crime. The pistol wavered in Margaret's grip. But what about the families I exposed? What about all the crimes that would have remained hidden forever? Some of them will face justice through proper legal channels, Aurelia replied. Others may escape punishment because your methods contaminated the evidence. But that's the price of doing things the wrong way, Margaret. Real justice is slow and imperfect, but it doesn't require us to become monsters ourselves. Saisi. Margaret stared at Aurelia for a long moment, the pistol still pointed at her but no longer steady. Rai, you don't understand. Rai, she said finally. Rai, you don't know what it's like to see evil triumph while good people suffer. You don't know what it's like to be powerless while the powerful destroy everything you care about. Rai, don't I? Aurelia asked. Margaret, I've spent my entire adult life watching the elite of this city commit crimes and escape consequences. I've seen families destroyed, lives ruined, justice denied. The difference is that I chose to fight it through education, through helping victims, through working within the system to create change. You chose to fight it by becoming part of the problem. The system is corrupt. Ah, Margaret cried. Shaha, the courts, the police, the government, they're all controlled by the same families I was trying to expose. Chah, chah, some of them, yes. Chah, Aurelia agreed. Chah, but not all. There are good people in positions of power, Margaret, people who want to see justice done. But your actions have made their job harder, not easier. You've given the corrupt officials an excuse to dismiss all accusations as the work of a madwoman. Margaret's shoulders began to shake with sobs. I wanted them to pay. I wanted them to suffer the way their victims suffered. And they will, Aurelia said softly. Perhaps not in the way you wanted, perhaps not as quickly as you hoped, but they will face consequences for their actions. The truth has a way of emerging, Margaret, just as you wrote in your letters, but it emerges through patience and persistence, not through murder and revenge. The sound of footsteps on the porch made both women freeze. Margaret's grip on the pistol tightened again, her moment of vulnerability passing as quickly as it had come. You led them here, she accused, her voice returning to its cold, calculating tone. Pahade, yes, Aurelia admitted. Hahade. I left clues for Sheriff Morrison. I knew that if I confronted you alone, one of us would likely die. This way, there's a chance for both of us to survive this. Cheek survive. Ki. Margaret laughed bitterly. Ki, you think I care about surviving? My life ended 3 years ago when my own family threw me away like garbage. Everything I've done since then has been about making sure the truth comes out before I die. That's but it doesn't have to end this way, Aurelia pleaded. You're brilliant, Margaret. You have skills and intelligence that could be used to help people, to fight for real justice. You could testify against the families you investigated, help prosecutors build legitimate cases against them. And spend the rest of my life in prison for murder. Margaret shook her head. I know, Miss Vance. This ends here tonight with both of us. The footsteps on the porch grew closer, and Margaret could hear voices. Sheriff Morrison calling for backup, deputies taking positions around the house. She was trapped, and she knew it. Margaret, Aurelia said urgently. It's not too late to surrender. You can still choose to do the right thing. True, the right thing. Margaret's laugh was hollow. I stopped knowing what the right thing was a long time ago. She raised the pistol, pointing it directly at Aurelia's heart. True, but I know one thing for certain. You won't live to see me hang for my crimes. True, Margaret, please. True. The door burst open as Sheriff Morrison and his deputies stormed into the room, their own weapons drawn. Drop your weapon, Morrison shouted. Drop it now. Margaret spun toward the door, her pistol swinging away from Aurelia for just a moment. It was the opening Aurelia had been waiting for. She lunged forward, grabbing Margaret's wrist and forcing the gun upward just as it fired. The shot went wild, embedding itself in the ceiling as both women struggled for control of the weapon. Margaret was younger and driven by desperation, but Aurelia had the advantage of surprise and determination. Let go, Margaret screamed, trying to wrench the pistol free. Agami, let me finish this. No, Aurelia replied through gritted teeth. Dax, I won't let you destroy yourself completely. The struggle lasted only seconds before the deputies reached them, but to Aurelia it felt like an eternity. She could feel Margaret's strength beginning to fade, the fight going out of her as the reality of her situation finally sank in. When the deputies finally separated them and secured Margaret's hands behind her back, she collapsed to her knees, all the fire gone out of her eyes. She looked up at Aurelia with an expression of profound exhaustion and defeat. Why? She whispered. Why did you save me? After everything I've done, everything I was about to do to you. Why? Aurelia knelt down beside her former student, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Because you were my student, Margaret. Because I failed you once by not seeing your pain, by not helping you find a better way. I won't fail you again. Margaret stared at her for a long moment, then began to cry. Not the angry, frustrated tears of before, but the deep, soul-wrenching sobs of someone who had finally reached the end of a very dark road. Shu, I'm sorry. She whispered between sobs. Shu, I'm so sorry for everything. I wanted them to pay. I wanted justice. Shimwara, I know. Aurelia said softly. I know you did, and maybe in some small way you achieved that. The crimes you exposed are real, and some of those families will face consequences. But the price you paid, the price everyone paid, it was too high. As the deputies led Margaret away, she looked back at Aurelia one last time. Will you visit me? In prison? Aurelia nodded. Yes, Margaret, I will. And maybe together, we can find a way for you to use your talents for something good. Something that honors the victims instead of creating new ones. Sir, Margaret managed a weak smile through her tears. I'd like that, Miss Vance. I'd like that very much. Margaret was arrested without further resistance, her pistol clattering to the floor as the full weight of her situation finally settled upon her. During her trial, which became a national sensation covered by newspapers from New York to New Orleans, the complete truth about her crimes was revealed in excruciating detail. She was convicted of multiple murders, blackmail, breaking and entering, document forgery, and a dozen other crimes. The evidence against her was overwhelming, not just the physical proof found in the abandoned house, but also her own detailed journals documenting every step of her 3-year campaign of revenge. But perhaps her cruelest punishment was the final irony. Her own letters, written in the perfect calligraphy she had stolen and corrupted from Aurelia, were used as the primary evidence against her in court. The revelation of Margaret's crimes had a profound and lasting effect on Savannah. On one hand, many of the crimes she had exposed were indeed real, and several elite families faced serious legal consequences for their past acts. The city was forced to confront its own deep-seated hypocrisy and systemic corruption. Grand juries were convened, investigations launched, and some of the most powerful families in Georgia saw their empires crumble under the weight of long-buried truths. On the other hand, Margaret's illegal methods had contaminated much of the evidence she had gathered. Defense attorneys successfully argued that documents obtained through breaking and entering, testimony coerced through blackmail, and evidence planted by a known killer could not be trusted in a court of law. Many criminals escaped punishment not because they were innocent, but because Margaret's vigilante justice had made legitimate prosecution impossible. The city learned a bitter and expensive lesson about the crucial difference between justice and revenge, between the patient work of legal investigation and the immediate satisfaction of violent retribution. Aurelia faced her own reckoning with the past. Her confession about the Pemberton documents, although initially made under extreme duress, was still a truthful admission of a serious crime. True to her word, she voluntarily presented herself to the authorities and provided a full confession of her actions 15 years earlier. However, due to the extraordinary circumstances surrounding her confession, her youth at the time of the original crime, her complete cooperation in Margaret's capture, her years of subsequent good works, and the fact that the primary victims, the Pemberton family, had all died of natural causes, she received only a suspended sentence and was ordered to pay substantial restitution to the descendants of the freed slave family she had wronged. More importantly, for her own peace of mind, Aurelia used her painful experience to establish the Savannah Justice Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping families who had been victims of crimes covered up by the wealthy and powerful. She sold her house and closed her calligraphy school, using every penny of the proceeds to fund the foundation's work. The foundation provided legal assistance to poor families seeking justice, helped locate and properly bury the remains of murder victims, and worked to compensate the descendants of those who had been wronged by the elite's crimes. Aurelia spent the remainder of her life traveling throughout Georgia and the broader South, using her skills not to teach the children of the wealthy, but to help illiterate former slaves and poor whites navigate the complex legal and bureaucratic systems that had been designed to exclude them. The story of Margaret Whitmore and Aurelia Vance became a dark legend in Savannah, told in hushed whispers in the parlors of the great mansions and in the taverns down by the docks. It served as a powerful reminder that the search for justice when corrupted by personal revenge and vigilante violence can become every bit as destructive as the original crimes it seeks to expose. Calligraphy, once the ultimate symbol of refinement, education, and social status, was never viewed the same way in Savannah again. Many of the surviving elite families abandoned the practice entirely, switching to typewriters for their important correspondence and hiring secretaries to handle their written communications. They feared that their own carefully crafted words might someday be turned against them, just as Margaret had turned Aurelia's beautiful art into an instrument of terror. But perhaps the most important and lasting lesson was about the true nature and power of truth itself. As Margaret had written in her twisted manifesto, "Raw truth, like ink, always finds a way to emerge." The crucial difference lay not in whether the truth would eventually surface, but in how that truth was revealed, through the patient, methodical work of legitimate justice, or through the violent and ultimately self-destructive path of personal revenge. Years later, when historians and criminologists studied the extraordinary events of 1845 in Savannah, they noted a final, bitter irony that would have been lost on the participants at the time. Margaret Whitmore had become so obsessed with achieving the technical perfection of Aurelia's calligraphy that she had completely lost sight of the original and noble purpose of the written word, to communicate truth, beauty, and human connection across the barriers of time and distance. Her relentless pursuit of technical perfection in service of destruction had corrupted not just her soul, but the very art form she claimed to honor. The true tragedy was not just the crimes of Savannah's elite, or even Margaret's descent into murder and madness, but the perversion of something beautiful into something monstrous. Aurelia, for her part, never taught calligraphy again. She spent her remaining years working directly with the poor and dispossessed, using her remarkable skills to help them write letters to distant family members, fill out legal documents, and navigate the bureaucratic maze that so often stood between them and justice. Her calligraphy, once a symbol of elite exclusion and social stratification, became a tool of inclusion, empowerment, and social justice. The abandoned Whitmore house, where Margaret had planned her elaborate revenge, was demolished by order of the city council, but the marshy plot of land was never rebuilt upon. Local residents claimed it was cursed, and perhaps in some sense it was. Today, more than a century and a half later, it remains an empty field covered with Spanish moss, where the wind whispers through the ancient oaks, carrying with it the echoes of a time when the beauty of the written word became a weapon of mass destruction, and when the pursuit of justice became indistinguishable from the very evil it sought to destroy. So what did you think of this dark story from Savannah? Was Margaret's quest for justice justified, even with her extreme methods? Comment your opinion, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories from the past that still echo in the present.